Your comments, opinions, and questions are all welcome. I only ask that you respect and show consideration for others by not monopolizing all the time. And if you want to speak, you can speak from your seat or stand up and just identify yourself and speak clearly, please. And hopefully these microphones around the room will pick you up. Just a reminder, we will have a town hall meeting dedicated solely to the issue of sidewalks on March 14th at 5 p.m. in this room. And that's open to everybody. This meeting tonight will end precisely at 6 o'clock so we can proceed with our own monthly Board of Commissioners business meeting. Thank you. Who wants to go first?
Everybody's chicken, I'll go first. I'm Bill Osmolsky. I live at 126 Mimosa Boulevard. My comments today are related to whether we are fostering or stifling the dialogue about sidewalks. Early in February, we sent a letter to the Shoreline requesting that we be allowed to publish an article to respond to Mayor Brodman's points that he had put in the Shoreline about sidewalks. Shortly after I got the response, sorry, no letters to the editor. Well, I agree with the no letters to the editor policy, but we didn't ask for that. And on the contents page, it says articles always welcome, but ours was not. I don't want to argue with Janie. I stated in the note we sent to her, we appreciate everything that she does, and I'm friends with her husband. We play a lot of pickleball together. And I suspect that this is not solely Janie's decision. Then the March Shoreline, we have more comments about the sidewalk. This time it included some comments from the opposition, but I kind of feel like Mayor Brodman was able to pick and choose from the comments that he wanted to include. And you're more or less controlling the conversation when you do it like that. So we started talking about, well, who actually owns the shoreline? How is it funded? And who makes the decisions about the content? So apparently the town government is the one that owns the shoreline. And many of us, I think, would agree with what Abraham Lincoln hoped for. Government of the people, by the people, for the people. Well, when the government controls what goes in the town paper and excludes articles with opposing views, that's not American. That's not democratic. That's autocratic. That's all I have.
Is there anybody out there that would like to respond? Anybody here? Well, I would just say that, I mean, the shoreline is run by volunteers, like all of our boards and committees. And I haven't spoken with Janie in a long time about this particular issue, but it sounds like you have. And,
no, I just had an email.
I don't want to defend what I've done because, I mean, on the sidewalk issue, I'm an economist and I like to play devil's advocate. And I think debate sharpens the arguments on both sides. And so I chose to be a proponent for sidewalks on this particular issue. Whether we build them or not, you know, is almost immaterial. But because I chose that side of the argument, I will argue the best I can. And we are going to have a town hall meeting, give everybody an opportunity to air their counter arguments in their opposition. The other thing that I think is coloring my opinion, and I thought the last article I put in the Shoreline was fair and balanced. It was point and counterpoint. There were some things that your group sent me that I just simply wasn't going to put in a town newspaper comments about how we do not want to be like naming some neighboring towns. I don't think we should be saying that to our neighboring towns that we cooperate with on a whole lot of business issues that we work with in emergencies and a number of other things. We're all dependent on each other on this island. And it's not, I just didn't think that that was something that we wanted to put in Pine Hill Shores' newspaper.
Can I just real quick, I just want to say, one of the things, I mean, I don't know if you remember Teddy Roosevelt's called it the bully pulpit. When you're the mayor and commissioners, you have responsibility, but you also have a voice that to speak, and he's got a mayor column, and and he takes responsibility for that, and that's part of his, I would say, right, being the mayor and representing this town. So.
Well, nobody wants to silence the mayor. What we're asking for is to have our voice heard. So I'd like to know whose decision is it not to allow an article opposing sidewalks?
Here's the issue, I think, because it's run, the paper is run by volunteers. I think, well, I can't speak for them, but I believe they don't want to be put into a position of having to edit somebody's comments against somebody else's opinion. You know what I mean? If it turns it all ugly or personal or repetitive or whatever, people who are the editors of the shoreline will be criticized for the same reason you're criticizing.
Well, that's why you have the editors, so they can preview it and decide whether it's appropriate and reasonable and intelligent or not. If it's not, then they can say, no, this isn't appropriate for the paper.
Yeah.
Not accepted.
I don't have anything to do with running the shore.
No, they never even allowed us to submit it.
I'm not going to get into the battle one of the versus the other, but I think maybe a little bit of background would be helpful. And I think the shoreline has developed, becoming a whole lot more professional in its initial parts. I mean, just yesterday in History Committee, we were looking at some of the shorelines from the 1970s. And I don't even get off the subject, except at that point in time, the shoreline was not a government paper. It was simply a community communication outlet, if you will, of the part-timers and full-timers that were here, done by volunteers, and sort of developed from that. And somewhere along the line in that closet, there's a whole lot of historical information. Somewhere along the line, I saw some editors of the past or volunteers in the past put some of the guidelines in that you would face and suggesting that they not be letters to the editor and suggesting that it wasn't a point and counterpoint type of newspaper. It was simply probably similar to social media now, except at that point it was at the point of a typewriter. I think the question is valid. I mean, I think that's the reason. I understand the frustration thing. I happen to be a proponent of metaphorically, that one of the most dangerous things that goes on is to have a pressure cooker bomb. In other words, where you like that happened with the sidewalk bomber in Boston. They took a pressure cooker, sealed up the outlet, and then heated it up, and it exploded. And I think metaphorically with groups and so forth, that happens also. When you cut off discussion, people get angry and then things go beyond that. How is that related to the shoreline? I don't know. I think we need to kind of look at that and see where it goes. I mean, clearly, because funding comes from here, it ends up being as you suggested, a government-sponsored newspaper. And that doesn't ring very well in democracy, very honestly. It doesn't, as you pointed out. So I'm not going to say much more except to think, I think we need to look at it. I think it's our responsibility.
I have said this for quite some time. If you're not afraid of Janie Price, you should be. And I say that with great affection for Janie because she does an extraordinary job. I think everybody, even if you don't know much of what she really does, you probably credit her with doing an extraordinary job with bringing a whole bunch of things together that would be very difficult if you didn't have someone with her professional expertise doing it for us. I've made this point in the past, and it has not been supported. And I think the way I would characterize it is, as explained to me a number of years ago, we don't want to put anything negative in a community newspaper, which is intended to be primarily and hopefully a very positive thing for our community. I think you can expand it. I've suggested that we do something like, a column sound off. My view is if somebody wants to say something stupid, and I've said stupid things many times, people who hear what I'm going to say or what someone says in a paper are going to judge for themselves. But I think that we, as Clerk suggests, and the mayor, we probably ought to at least look at it and see how we might be able to incorporate some of those community ideas, issues, because this is the largest crowd we've had for how many months now? 2 years. Okay, but prior to the pandemic, this was the biggest crowd we had since when?
In modern memory.
In modern memory. So my point being, people come to this meeting sporadically and they get information, but a whole bunch of people read the shoreline. And many of the views expressed here are great. I mean, they're good ideas that are passed around, but they're only captured, at least to a degree, in the minutes. How many people here went back and read the minutes from the Board of Commissioners meeting in January? You did not. Well, I say that.
Yesterday, I read it.
Okay. Well, there'll be a test, Mike, later on, so.
Okay, bring it on.
Read all the public comments that were in the survey too.
Yeah.
We published all 368 of them.
We did. Can I say something?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just to respond to Mayor's point about the comparison between Atlantic Beach and Emerald Isle, and I made that comment, and it was in reference to the fact that we live in a maritime forest, and they are way past that. I mean, they have, the businesses downtown, so they need their sidewalks to encourage pedestrians to their business. We don't have that here. We have our maritime forest, and that's what we like, because that's why we live here. So that was the story behind that comment.
Yes, but it still is,
It wasn't derogatory, it was the truth.
I know, but. that's
It's not derogatory, Mayor. I really question what you're saying. I can see if you want to have a bully pulpit, fine. But as Bill said, a bully pulpit, or I think it's off, can be also the first part of an autocracy. And we live in a democracy. Democracies are not easy. They require community, communication, and collaboration. And that's what we're trying to do here. If you couldn't appreciate that there was some discourse in the community, all you had to do was look at the signs that are going up. Those signs tell you there are people who disagree with your opinion. So when you say you're going to take a stand and this is your stand and you want to do a good job at it, fine, but let's see the other side. Let's see facts. We don't have facts.
I took a stand to draw other people's opinions out with the purpose, and I stated that.
Yes, and
It brings out the best of both sides.
well, it should have been obvious before your last column that people were concerned about the sidewalks. The other thing is the shoreline as Robert said, is read by people here and not here, the part-timers and full-timers. So our voices were silenced by not having any comments or response or ability to address some issues. And so having the ability to communicate with the people of Pine Hill Shores, the part-timers and full-timers, is important. So what I'm requesting is that we have an open dialogue. For instance, what is the problem? None of us really know what the problem is that we need sidewalks for. What are the potential solutions? What facts do we have? What reproducible data do we have that the proposed sidewalks, which we're not sure exactly where they're going to go, would solve this problem? What are the short-term and long-term impacts of what you're proposing? Because we're only here for a short time. People, hopefully the island will exist and it'll be resilient and people will come on after us. So what is the long-term impact? Many communities in this country are now depaving because of climate change. Why does a tree city want to pave? Water runoff. You mentioned the water will take care of itself. It will go into the canals. Will it? Do we have data that says the increased water runoff when we put in sidewalks and gutters will be adequately taken care of and not just contaminate the canals with more trash, debris, et cetera, from the roads? So let's have some data, let's have a dialogue, and let's work as a community. Thank you.
Thank you. That's why we're having a meeting Monday as well. Right?
Yeah, Craig Lechner, 146 Mimosa. That's the whole purpose of the meeting coming up on Monday. The last 10 minutes, we've been talking about things that I think, I plan on attending that will be valid during that conversation. I didn't plan on speaking, I just plan on listening, but I think a bigger problem that this town has is we have an upcoming turnover in police, fire, EMS, town staff. And part of it is, I think, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but I don't mind paying taxes. And I wouldn't mind paying additional taxes. And I would suggest that the town look at raising taxes to help solve the long-term problem of turnover. Police officers, where's Justin? Sonny, the water department, all of the basic things that I take for granted. We live in a maritime forest, but I doubt anybody says, I want to retire to a maritime forest. I've never heard that. And I'm retired and here I am. But anyway, that's my point. If we need to raise taxes, which I think we do to retain damn good employees.
You're right. We have a lot of priorities and limited amount of money. So no decision has been made on building a sidewalk yet whatsoever. We have to sort out the priorities in the course of our upcoming.
I'm thinking regardless of the sidewalks or not, personal safety in the whole community is much more important to me than.
Anyone else out here?
I'd like to speak.
Please.
My name's Libby Green. I live 276 Salt Path Road. I'd like a show of hands to know if anyone else lives on one of the small lots that will have the sidewalk right in front of them. Am I the only one here tonight? Okay, well, let me give you my concern. We've lived in Pine Hill Shores now, it's our second home for about 16 years. We enjoy it. We enjoy the trees in our yard because they help with noise, the traffic on the road. They help with wind protection, sound, safety, privacy. And with the sidewalk, about a quarter to a third of our trees will be taken down. And we will be right on the noise of the highway, the new noise of the people coming down the sidewalk. My son works for DOT, and his compromise suggestion is to maybe extend, I don't know what you call from the white line.
The shoulder.
That's called the shoulder, okay, that's a certain turn and
The bike lane, yeah.
to extend the shoulder for a bike path. I don't know if it would work for a walking path, but from what we see from where we live, it's the bikes that come by our house, not walkers.
We actually, well, last time they paved Highway 58, that was a proposal, but the Department of Transportation said it was going to cost too much money.
Okay. Well, if you surveyed the homeowners of those small lots, I think the survey would show almost 100% that we are not in favor of the sidewalks. So I'd like for you to consider those of us that will be adversely affected when you make a decision.
I think, and thank you for that, Libby. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, for the meeting on the 14th, we're going to start with the manager at least telling us, so everybody knows ground truth, what is currently proposed and perhaps what's not, to take some of the, some of the hyperbole out of the discussion. But I think with that background, it will be helpful for everybody to understand what the town has engaged in thus far to look at sidewalks, how would they be, where would they be placed, and then what the next steps would be if there was a decision to actually move forward with them. So
I'm sorry, I can't be here
Yeah, I
on the
understand.
14th. I've got,
we appreciate
I've got
you being here.
grandchildren that
We
take
appreciate
cars
you being
on
here.
the sidewalks.
Yeah.
But
All right.
I drove down today just
Thank you for doing that.
so that I could talk to you. Thank you.
Ma'am, you're on the north side of Virginia.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Just one.
What ought to be discussed, or we put it on the other side, closer to like Pine Old Town. There's more of a focus
Exactly.
without being right in somebody's front yard.
Just as I don't want to take somebody else's, if somebody else wanted to make a comment, but just as a point of discussion, something that's not clear to me, and maybe Brian, you can talk a little bit to this. There has been an assertion that the electric cooperative is going to cut back on the south side in the coming years. Do we have any information or understanding of that?
Yeah, so Carteret Craven, recall, some of you might recall that 3 or 4 years ago, they did some major trimming on the south side of the road. And there was a pretty significant blowback, particularly on the west end of town. And they told us then that their long-term capital planning had them replacing all the poles and all the lines on the south side. And what they said at the time is, when we do that, we had town hall meetings and such just on that issue. They said that when we do that, we're going to do it. We're not going to play nice, if you will, the way they did 3 or 4 years ago. 3 or 4 years ago, we had dimensions around lines again. This is going to be a major capital project. It's still on their plans. They don't have a year certain. I'll try to check it prior to Monday, so I know that. But yes, there is a capital plan by the electric cooperatives to replace all the lines on the south side, which would involve major vegetation removal on the south side, more so than we saw 3 or 4 years ago.
They plan to put in taller poles, I believe, so they don't have to do as much in future years. But to do that, they may have to clear a clear path right through there. And then if you take a look at those wires along some of the houses like Pinewood, Knollwood, Bay, if you clear cut right under the wires, that's going to be right up in somebody's front porch, the same as it would on the north side of the street down by Pinewood Boulevard.
The only reason, and I appreciate, Brian, that explanation, the only reason I bring it up is think that needs to at least be considered in the decision-making related to, are we going to do this on the north side or are we not? If we're going to, for lack of a better term, denude the south side, do we want to do the same thing on both sides, the north side and the south side? And again, I'm not trying to express hyperbole here, but I think everybody can understand what's going to happen if indeed they do that. So the question becomes, is the south side perhaps a better option? Not because they're going to take all that stuff out, but if they're going to take all that stuff out and we think that a sidewalk is still of benefit, then we ought to incorporate that into the overall thinking.
And when is this supposed to happen?
I don't know, ma'am. I'll announce to the best of my ability that on Monday. But it was
Last I heard was 2024. That was wild.
I shouldn't forget that's their right of way.
It's still right away.
Yeah, I was going to.
We are not doing it, it's the electric company.
But we don't have, one second, do we have any say-so in that? I guess is really the question.
well, it's not our right of way. It's the state's, and it's not their right of way. It's the state's right of way. And my guess is no, we will have much less leverage than we did last time when it was just trimming.
Mike, background. Mike,
Okay, Mike Strick, 125 Mimosa. Now, I'm confused about the agenda. You know, the agenda before was sidewalks, pay raises, the kayak launch thing, and then the little trail, right?
No.
Oh, and I'm all screwed up.
That's the meeting.
you're not screwed up. You probably have a misunderstanding like, oh, this is the first time we've done this.
Okay.
And the first 30 minutes was just an open discussion.
Right, I got that.
Okay.
But your meeting after this, those are the top, okay, I said the wrong words.
No.
Those,
No sidewalks, no.
okay, well now, the new email came out and said sidewalks are next week. Okay.
Right.
Okay, so first thing, the kayak. I think it's over here, you know, the launch thing. My question is, how many people are going to be served? And I came up with this brainstorm. I'm not for sure how this place is situated. PKA and PIKSCO, two associations, they all intermingle, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm saying, I think it's some of these little, what do you want to call it, little communities that aren't part of those two memberships is where the kayak people are. Okay, my solution, no?
Mike, we have a meeting once a year with the representative of all 20 odd homeowners associations. Been doing this for a number of years, and that is the number one question we hear from
What?
all these little homeowners associations that are not part of PK.
Right.
FISCO would desperately like a PTA to launch kayak.
Okay, solution.
All right.
Those little cards we get, $100. $100, you know, the homeowners associations sell those little cards, to those people for $100. Well, because,
They don't want to do that.
huh?
They don't want to do that.
They don't want to do that, but the people that have access to the kayaks are doing that. Okay, well, this is just my idea. Then,
The homeowners associations don't want to sell.
have you asked them?
There's a precedent right there.
I would raise it. We're going to have a homeowners association meeting tomorrow. So
Okay.
I'd raise that at that meeting, Mike.
See, my beef is, I don't know how many people want to do the kayaks, okay? Well, I don't know, has there been research, 10 people come and say, hey, I want it? Okay, sell them memberships, that's just one thing. And then I call it the tourist place across the sound there. They could go launch it there. Then they can go down here to Emerald Isle, you know, they've got some other ones. And then I'm not saying this is illegal, probably, but I know I'm close to a couple of, what do they call those? Rock Basin and stuff. Man, you don't need a card. And maybe it's trespassing if they just come there and they can just lug their little thing down there and drop it off. And there's at least 2 harbors close to me where they can launch. Okay? Then second thing, what is the purpose of this little trail? Okay? You know, whenever I've been here, I don't see many people walking. There's one old couple that comes by every morning on a bicycle and they do this little thing and then that's it. And I just found out about this Curry Trail or something, you know, like I'll dedicate a day or two and I'll count heads about how many people come and walk.
And it's just kind of like, I'm just thinking $100,000 or something for this. I haven't even taken the time to find out where they want to launch this thing.
Mike,
But,
that's the last
okay,
word.
fine, thanks, Bob, have a nice day.
But one last word here. The purpose of those trails in the summertime is to feed the mosquitoes.
Okay?
It's a lot.
Okay, I'd like to call this first regular monthly meeting of the Pine Knoll Shores Board of Commissioners to order. Please stand on the agenda.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. And I'd like to suggest a couple of rearrangements here. And it all has to do with item 7, new business. I would propose that we have our discussion of the Unified Development Ordinance first. That would be item A. Item B would then be the Veterans Park kayak launch. Item C would then be the competitive compensation for recruitment and retention of PKS staff. And then I would propose immediately after that, that presentation, that we go into a closed session. I would ask for a motion to go into a closed session to discuss personnel issues. And this is related to the competitive compensation issue. And then and then we come out of closed session and continue with the rest of the agenda. Does anybody have any comments or problems with that?
No,
If not,
I move we accept the agenda as amended.
okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Next item on the agenda is disclosures and conflicts of interest. Based on the agenda we just discussed, does anybody have any disclosures or conflicts that they would like to highlight? Please.
No.
No disclosures. Thank you. Announcements. March 14th, that's Monday, 5 p.m., Sidewalk Town Hall meeting. Come early. I'm not sure how many seats will we have out here, but if you want one, I would suggest you come early. March 18th at 12 o'clock, North Carolina Arbor Day tree giveaway at Town Hall. Charlie, do you want to mention any more? I think the Garden Club is also having a celebration that morning.
Yes, the Garden Club's going to have a ceremony at 10 a.m. prior to this event, and then they're going to come help volunteer with the giveaway.
There was an email went out on it townwide today.
Yes, I sent out an email. If you do want a tree, you're going to have to complete that form that's attached to that email and give it to the volunteers when you arrive.
Thank you. March 23rd will be the second regular monthly meeting of the Board of Commissioners. In these spring months going forward, we always meet twice a month with the second meeting focused only on the budget process. So that will be March 23rd. And then April 16th, which is, I believe, the Saturday before Easter Sunday, the Parks and Recreation Committee will have its Easter egg hunt at Garner Park. You know, there was, I believe, a hiatus for the last 2 years. And last year they went around to individuals' homes and hid eggs in their front yards for the kids. But we're going back to Garner Park this year.
Can I add to that announcement? If you would like to donate candy or plastic eggs, bring them here by Town Hall.
Please. Thank you. Charlie, are there any public comments?
One from, that was sent to you.
Right. Jan Boyce, I believe.
Apologize, I'm having some computer issues right now.
You're pulling up on my phone.
You do that as a backup plan?
I'm checking for this.
Do you have it?
I do. You want to read it?
Sure.
It'll probably go away too.
Dear Mayor, I live at 22 Bermuda Green and I've been there for over 20 years. I understand that a sidewalk is being considered in front of my home and that will completely remove all landscaping in front of our complex. This would have a severe negative impact on my property and those of my neighbors. My understanding was that this landscaping was approved by the town when we paid for installation about 18 years ago. The removal would negatively impact the privacy to our properties as we are so close to the road. You are planning to install the sidewalk. We would be further impacted by the removal of buffer with increased headlights in our windows and noise disturbance. It would reduce our home's values and enjoyment of living in the community. I am totally opposed to the construction of the sidewalk on this side of the road. There appears to be more space with less impact to the homes on the opposite side of the street. I would sincerely hope that this alternative would seriously be considered. Please let me know what else I can do or my community can do to prevent the sidewalk from construction in front of our homes. Thank you. Jam Boys, 22 Bermuda Green.
Thank you. I sent her a response reminding her of the meeting on Monday. All right, the next item on the agenda is in fact the consent agenda. We have 4 items on the consent agenda. First item is the minutes from our February 10th, 2022 Board of Commissioners meeting, which was our annual retreat. Does anybody have any comments or changes they'd like to propose?
I do on page 6. I think it's just a typo. We refer to the Community Appearance Committee. I think we need to change it to the Community Appearance Commission. Okay. And just a comment on page 10, we discussed the town hall after what we just did. I think it would be my recommendation that we refer to it as you did, I think, Mayor, earlier, as an open forum, because a town hall suggests there's a specific agenda that you're going to be talking about. And I think we did indeed talk about it as an open forum. I know you just selected that wording, but I would suggest we call it an open forum as opposed to a town hall.
Okay.
That's all I had.
Anybody else, Clark?
And when you do the consent agenda and you have the appointments, you're going to name the appointment. I just don't think that those should be as common consent agendas, just say without an announcement.
I will go item by item and then we'll just take one vote on the entire package. Any other comments on the minutes? No, okay. We have several volunteer appointments. Fred Fulcher, who is a former commissioner here, has applied to become a full-time member of the Board of Adjustment. The second appointment, Gene Biddle, has applied to become a member, a full-time, full resident member of the Planning Board. I believe they've all been interviewed by the chairpersons.
And I've talked to Gene quite length of time.
So all we have to do tonight is approve them, and we can just do that by approving the consent agenda. The next item is tax discoveries and releases, and I think there's $5.73 or something about. And the final consent agenda item is a resolution to approve the sale of 2 Chevy police cars. I won't say they're old police cars, but
Today's Chevrolet, so that's implied, sir.
Yeah.
2 Chevy police cars. From what I'm reading about used car prices, it's a good time to sell.
Let's sell them now.
Does anybody have any comments on
Could you
that?
just reveal a mileage on each one?
One is 107,000 and then the other, I believe, is 97,000.
That's fine. The reason I say that is because some years ago, they'd get rid of them with a lot less mileage. At least we're pushing.
And we set an objective of 100,000.
Right. And that's much better than 10 years ago.
Okay. And if there's no other discussion, I'd like to have a motion to approve the consent agenda with the changes. Okay.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, it's unanimous. Okay, item number 7. First item for discussion here is the Unified Development Ordinance. And I
have Kevin on tap to
Mayor,
talk.
before we get into that, can I make a comment on this?
Sure.
Please. I'm afraid that we're getting into committee business. This is, most of the stuff in here is a committee function of the planning board. The point we're asking for a clarification, I don't have any problem with, but the rest of them have been talked about at 2 separate meetings. And I think this is absolutely micromanaging, and I'm worried that the members of these committees are going to say, well, if we're looking over your shoulder and going to start criticizing, they're going to become demoralized. But I think 3 or 4 of us were at that meeting or listened into those meetings, so we've all heard the same information, right? That's enough.
Kevin online?
Yes.
Okay. Kevin, are you there?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Mayor, on my end, apologies. Kevin, are you there?
Good evening, Mr. Yes,
Okay.
sir. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure to speak before you, Mayor, and members of the Board of Commissioners and the public. You do have in your agenda packet tonight a memorandum from Commissioner Robert Cox that raises a number of questions. And while I won't specifically go by question, I have sort of divided those inquiries into sort of 5 topic areas, and I'd be happy to go through those one at a time. First set of questions really has to do with the relationship to the current town code in regard to the planned unified development ordinance. And the question is whether or not, one of the questions is whether or not the UDO would replace current chapters in our town code. Yes. The new Pine Knoll Shores development ordinance will take the place of at least some parts of the current town code, as they will be repealed, updated, and incorporated into a single document. As a standalone ordinance approved by the BOC, the UDO would be fully enforceable under North Carolina general statutes. And while the UDO may not be inserted into the body of the town code, it can certainly codify it as an appendices after adoption by the BOC. I think it's important to note that whether the new development ordinance is a chapter within the town code, located as an appendices, or as a standalone document, it would be fully enforceable under North Carolina general statutes. Second topic area has to do with review of the articles that are being presented to the planning board. The town's consultant, Rick Flo, introduced to the planning board the first of 9 articles or chapters of the draft Pine Knoll Shores development ordinance at the planning board's February meeting. The way this process is working, the planning board has a month to review the articles before providing feedback to Rick at the March planning board meeting. I myself am also reviewing the draft articles, and we're providing written comments to the consultant. Of course, Board of Commissioner members, as you know, have been provided the same information as the planning board via the notebooks. You're certainly encouraged to be engaged throughout this process as much as you want to be, and I encourage you to do so. With regards to subcommittee and planning board input to the consultant, no, there has not been a specific subcommittee of the planning board established to review the draft articles. This was done intentionally, since the goal was to provide an opportunity for each member of the planning board to be as fully engaged in the UDO process as they wanted to be. By not having a subcommittee, all planning board members receive the same materials, the same briefings, and the same opportunities to be engaged in this process. I think this process or this approach makes the process more efficient and effective, as there's no need to try to bring the entire planning board up to speed on the work of any smaller group. And following the review of each previous month's articles during a planning board meeting, new articles will be introduced, and this process will be repeated monthly as the draft document is fully developed. Fourth topic area has to do with the other appointed boards and committees. No, the SBC has not been specifically engaged to work on development of the UDO, as this really is a planning board function under North Carolina general statutes. Certainly planning board members, just like any citizen, has an opportunity to become engaged in the work, since the work the planning board's doing is done in a public meeting. With regard to Board of Adjustment and CAC involvement, really the changes being proposed at this point are not substantive in regards to the day-to-day workings of the Board of Adjustment or the Community Appearance Commission. We're simply trying to make the framework in which those two boards operate consistent with 160D of North Carolina General Statutes. I'll give you two examples related to the Board of Adjustment that are sort of housekeeping. Currently in two chapters of the Town Code, we talk about the duties of the Board of Adjustment. Those two discussion points in Chapter 2 and in Chapter 74 conflict with each other. In fact, one is seemingly a violation of state law because it's above and beyond the authority of the Board of Adjustment. And the second thing I would point out with the Board of Adjustment with regard to housekeeping, one of the duties of the Board of Adjustments is very important is the review of variances. Currently in the Town Code, we have 9 criteria that the Board of Adjustment must find affirmative one before granting a variance. North Carolina General Statutes only allow a community to have 4 criteria, and they're very specific. The good news is we have those 4 criteria, but my point is we go above and beyond what North Carolina law allows in our ordinance relative to the function, not only the Board of Adjustment, but to a certain degree also the Community Appearance Commission. And the changes related to those two bodies, in particular at this point, is simply just to make them aligned with Chapter 160D and their authority under state code. The last point, which is certainly very important, has to do with citizen engagement for this process. And while the specifics of citizen engagement opportunities have not been outlined in detail at this point, they will be an important element as the draft document becomes finalized by the Planning Board. The consultant's proposal to the town, as well as its contract, calls for a specific task that addresses a public engagement element and a communication strategy. We certainly hope that citizens and property owners can be engaged as they want to be through the Planning Board meetings. But most importantly, once the Planning Board gets to the point where it has a working draft, and prior to any recommendation to the Board of Commissioners, we will engage stakeholders. Again, no specific at this point, but it's going to be very important that we have a community outreach effort before the Planning Board makes a decision to recommend or not recommend a document onto the Board of Commissioners. I think it's important that we wait till we have somewhat of a draft document assembled. I don't think it's fair to the public or to those to try to piecemeal the public with the chapters and articles as they come out through a public forum, other obviously than the opportunity to be engaged in the Planning Board meetings. So I hope that answers questions outlined there. If not, I'll be happy to offer any clarification or any additional information.
Thank you, Kevin. Does anybody have any comments or questions for Kevin?
I mean, I was one that inspired the discussion, and thank you, Kevin, for that review. What I would offer, I don't think this is micromanagement in any form whatsoever. I'm one of the people, like everybody here, that has been asked to review it. I've heard nothing whatsoever from the Planning Board in terms of how they want my input given to them. So I was also, I've spoken with 2 Planning Board members who have expressed the same issue. They have no idea or understanding what the process is. I'll take, Kevin, your brief, as you stated, and I'll press the I believe button and say, look, we'll go forward and we'll follow the process as you've outlined it. But I can tell you the Planning Board members that I've spoken with do not have the same understanding that you do. But I'd say let's just go ahead and move on. I would caution us, though, that without some schedule for engagement with the public, that we start scheduling soon, I think we will get behind the power curve. And my intent in raising these issues is not to push back against the UDO, it's to ensure that the UDO is successful. So we'll take the brief, Kevin. Thank you for doing that, and we'll just follow it along as you've described. Thank you.
Would like to remind everybody that the Planning Board meetings will be open to the public, the general public. If they have an interest in the UDO, are free to attend each and every meeting and any subsequent meetings that they have.
If I may, John, I think maybe the next meeting will help those members of the Planning Board, because last meeting was his first introduction of the first group of articles. And Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to start off the next meeting with, hey, Planning Board, what are your comments on that first group of articles? And then we leapfrog with the next couple groups. Is that correct, Kevin?
Yes, sir, that is correct. The meeting in March, the first part of this process will be review of what they received in February and give an opportunity to provide feedback before we introduce the next set of articles. And we'll repeat that process over the course of several months. One thing I didn't point out, and I should have, is as you know, the planning board members were afforded notebooks and have an opportunity to track this process, as well as the Board of Commissioners and town staff. We also are keeping one of those notebooks live at Town Hall. So at any time if a citizen wants to come in and see firsthand what the planning board's receiving and the Board of Commissioners receiving on a monthly basis, including updates, they're happy to do so. We have a public copy at Town Hall.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, can I just add a comment?
Sure, please.
The process of drafting and adopting a unified development ordinance is no different from adopting any original land use ordinance or amending an existing land use ordinance. If you will, the difference is the enormity of the project, because I'm going to predict that as you get to the final drafts, this document is going to be 250 to 350 pages.
Absolutely.
Now, the simple fact is that going through all these pages, the essence of the existing subdivision ordinance and the existing zoning ordinance is going to be moved into the UDO. And there are some inefficiencies and conflicts, if you will, in the existing documents. That just happens when these ordinances evolve over the 40-year history of, or 50-year history coming up on the town. And hopefully, between the consultants and the staff and the planning board members and you, that we can identify those inconsistencies and get them out. In terms of public engagement, you will do far more than what the law requires. The law will require a public hearing before you adopt a land use ordinance. There will be many, many, many more opportunities for the public to participate in the process prior to that public hearing. The planning board has got to review it. They've got to make comment to you. One of the comments that the planning board has got to make is whether or not this UDO as a whole is consistent with the land use plan. You will then, after you get the report from the planning board, you will publish notice of a public hearing, and you will have a public hearing. And then after the public hearing, as you debate whether to adopt this massive ordinance, you will also have to make a comment on whether it's consistent with the land use plan. If it is not consistent with the land use plan, but the board wants to adopt it, then you've got to amend the land use plan. So there's a lot of procedure that's just built in to this process. The only difference is it is an enormous undertaking, and it takes months or a year to get from the beginning to the end.
Thank you. Anybody have a question?
I think you hit right on it, Neil, and really, the devil is in the details, but there's been the conflicts from what people thought was in process, but you had to check out 5 different sources.
Right.
As I understand it, this process is supposed to make it so you can go to one source and get a solution, the way it's organized.
Commissioner Edwards, that is the theory. And the goal.
I'm at least trying to start with theoretical, but I think the devil in the detail part that I'm trying to express, that everyone needs to accept responsibility themselves, is where there are those conflicts and inconsistencies, where it comes down on to be the official one. Because there could be some changes in there. If you're not paying attention, there might be ones you're not aware of, just because of the enormity of it, that's all. So it's almost beyond human ability to comprehend the whole thing, because it is so enormous, it seems to me, is not being the person primarily involved in it. So you need to pay attention. We all need to pay attention.
Fortunately, we're not the first town to do this, rather probably close to the last one. And I think we've got a pretty good consultant who's we're working with on this. So that's going to help guide us through this because it's an enormous project. If this is going to take the better part of this year to finish it.
And in theory, if we're successful and we get all the conflicting statements out of these documents, we'll be right back soon to try to put them back in.
Probably.
Well, I guess if I could, my last comment is, I see, because this, in my view, is an enormous project, my view is it should be well planned out through the staff, the planning board, whatever function does that, so that there is a disciplined process getting to the end, so that when we get to the end, we know we've checked all the blocks as we've gone, and we have success at the end, and not be confused about what we're trying to do. So
There were 3 commissioners at the last planning board meeting in February. And while some of your questions, Robert, were excellent, I didn't know the relationship between the code and the UDO and land use plan and those sorts of things. But I think the process was pretty well laid out in that February meeting. And it seemed pretty clear to me.
okay, I was online. Again, I don't think we need to spend any more time on it. I accept that the process is there and it's going to work, and we don't have to worry about it. So I think that's good.
And public input will be, well, the public can come to the meetings. Okay, is there anything else on that? Next item is the Veterans Park Kayak Launch. Town Manager Kramer, please.
Okay, good evening, everybody. This item asks for board authority to apply for a grant from the Division of Coastal Management, also known as CAMA, for a kayak launch point to Bogue Sound at Veterans Park, and to contract for grant writing assistance to get the grant. As far as background, Ted mentioned it during our meeting. I don't think anyone's entered since then. So it is a common complaint, and it's mainly the homeowners associations on the south side of the highway, excluding those to the west end that have access at Beacon's Reach. That's mainly who the folks have asked about this. I might add, the last time we looked at this in detail, Clerk and I met with Bill Connect actually brought this up on behalf of some constituents. We looked at the possibility of a kayak launch right here behind Town Hall, just immediately next to the deck. Recall we met with a dredger, and we were wondering at the time, could we dredge I can't remember the dimensions, but a 20-foot wide, 3 or 4 foot deep canal, if you will, through that mud pit out back, not impacting the marsh to the right or left. The short answer is we could, but he said I'd be back every year to dredge it again. It would fill right.
Bulk the whole thing.
Yeah, that became untenable, and that was really the last time we looked at it. But we haven't considered this before. But it was brought up the last meeting, and so I present this. But as far as the grant, the public access grant, the town's used this extensively, in fact, in the past. Working with the coastal management, the Division of Coastal Management, we used this grant, Chris Jones and John Lamson did, for the 5 original public beach accesses. Okay, and then more recently, we received a grant for the Dogwood parking lot, which is on the south side of the north side of the highway across from Dogwood. So we have some backgrounds. Pre-applications are due on April 22nd. So we're starting to talk about this now. We are eligible. Of note, in the competitiveness arena, and this is new according to Kathy Benson, everyone's talking about nature-based things and tying projects to nature. Kathy believes that our work with the Coastal Federation with the living shoreline, which hopefully will help prevent erosion to that point over time, if it takes well, would support our competitiveness for the grant. The concept of the launch point is pretty simple. Number one, it's riprap reinforcement of the cliff. That's what it is right now. When you walk to the end of that point, it's a sheer cliff. A ramp of some sort down to the flat sandy beach. Sonny showed me some pictures of one local contractor that's done such a thing, and hand railings and ADA compliant access down to the soft sand. And then I added a 6 kayak rack, which people would put there at their own risk if they so choose. That I might add, I added in because I thought it was minimal cost, and I thought it added to the practicality of that as a kayak launch point. There is an issue, however, and that's ADA compliance. Okay, if this thing, any of these grant funds to be used, anything that's built has to be ADA compliant. The launch point, that's what I'm calling this, the launch point itself, in and of itself, would be ADA compliant. But getting down there certainly isn't ADA compliant. Ted, you mentioned the last time that you could pull a kayak down there on 7 wheels. And yeah, sure it's possible. But ADA compliance wise, that certainly doesn't cut it. So the grant person, who I'll introduce in a minute, I told her if this is a non-starter from the beginning, let me know, and we wouldn't be talking tonight. She spoke to DCM, and they said they would consider the application nonetheless, with the understanding, I want to be clear on this, that the town would consider providing ADA compliant access for the entire trail in future years when funding became available to apply for another public access grant. So I want to make clear that this doesn't commit the future board to do anything if we apply now for this grant. But, being fair and truthful, we would be saying DCM, yeah, we'd be thinking about doing that at some future time. I might add, I think Clark's probably the only one familiar with this, Clark and Julie. Yes, maybe you, Bruce, you've been here a while, but the original Veterans Park plan, the original grant was for about $400,000, and it included a walkway down that entire northern point. Joan Lamson put that design together, and a finger dock to the that goes out to the right into that kind of mud pit.
Just the right side, not the whole length.
Yeah. Well, yeah, my point was a dock to get to that point. Excuse me, a walkway to get to the kayak launch point.
But not we want to put it down.
Correct.
It was to the right, and it was a short distance and not the speed.
Well, I wasn't quite sure, and it wasn't that finger. It was the
right.
It was the right finger.
On March.
Yeah, my point wasn't that they planned a walkway out to where we're talking now. My point was they planned ADA compliant walkway for kayak launch.
So if we let golf carts go out on their trail, would that be ADA compliant?
No, I don't believe so. ADA compliance means walking or wheelchair.
Just a quick question. Is there a reason why you're not just bundling it all together in one package for the thing? Is it just going to be too much to even get the grant to have that?
Facing everything we're facing, if the board wants me to consider that, I will. But facing everything that we're facing dollar-wise, I did not consider that. I mean, I can look at that and come back.
No, I'm just curious.
A couple of questions.
So grant writing assistance, I mentioned this to the board previously, but Kathy Vinson is the same person we've worked with in the past. She used to run this grant program at DCM. And I would like to contract with her to help us with this. And I think any chance we have of getting it would be enhanced if she helped us do it. So cost of construction. So part of what we would pay Kathy Vinson, as you noted in the memo, is not only for the grant application, but is for design of the project. I won't have a fair cost of the design or accurate cost until that design is done. However, I wrote this memo from Florida last week, and I thought we would have the estimate, Sonny, from your contractor by then. So I don't have a piece of paper from a contractor. I spoke to some people about lumber and riprap costs, so I'm estimating $80,000 now for construction. I'm hoping it'll come in a little less than that. It's just for the kayak launch point, okay, nothing else. So the total project cost would be $10,000 to Vincent. That's an estimate. I think it'll come in lower than that, but I want to plan for Murphy. And then $80,000 for construction, $60,000 of which would be provided for by the state. So that would be $30,000 for the town. And lastly, the timeline, as mentioned, the application's due the 22nd of next month. And this would be a next fiscal year project. We'd find out this fall if we were awarded the grant, and we could step out this winter on the construction. So my requested action is to apply for the grant, but I'll entertain questions.
Thank you. Robert?
Just a couple of questions, Brian. Does the grant allow us to include Kathy's fee as well? Do you know?
Not her fee, but the design fee, good question, could go to our match.
Okay.
Okay, so
Could go to our in-kind.
our in-kind match, correct.
Our in-kind match.
Okay. And just educate me, I apologize for my ignorance on this, but if we were to apply and we were awarded the grant, would we have to take the money?
Would we have to take the money?
And the only reason I ask that question is there anything we want to know or would need to know between now and the actual awarding that would help us evolve this any further? Part of this is, and correct me if I'm wrong, they want us to consider making the trail ADA compliant. But did I hear you correctly? If we were to apply for another access grant in the future, that would have to be completed before they would consider that future grant? Or did I misunderstand that? In other words, at what point are we committed to making it ADA compliant, the trail ADA compliant? Or are we never?
We're never committed to it, but I did want to make it clear that I would say, we would say in that the board would consider, and I want to be very careful with this wording, but we would consider supporting this if we were eligible for a grant in the future, but it's not too wishy-washy.
And we don't, okay.
And to answer your first question, we're not committed until we really sign with the contractor and get our first reimbursement.
Yeah.
When we did that larger grant, when we net down to present day Veterans Park, we only used half of the grant money and gave it back. So.
Okay, and we don't have any estimate at this point on what that trail becoming ADA compliant would cost.
I have not. We haven't even got the estimate on the kayak launch yet. But I'll see if I can get an estimate on that entire trail.
Yeah. My only thought is if we did get awarded this and we did that commitment to make it ADA compliant, but we applied for another access grant in the future, and they looked back at us and they said, well, you haven't made that trail ADA compliant yet, so we're going to hold this.
No, I would think, matter of fact, one of the categories for this grant, which is annual, by the way, it comes out every year. They use part of money for it. So it was state funded, in other words, Parks and Recreation Trust Fund. That's where the money comes from. if we did this launch, ADA compliant launch point, based on my understanding of the criteria, that would help our eligibility when we want to improve it to extend the ADA compliant walkway the whole way out. Because one of the categories is this is improvement of existing facilities.
I just have a question. Julie, where do you plan to take out the grant preparation? Are you going to put that in this upcoming budget? Or are you planning to?
It would have to be in the budget that we're in right now, because it's due April, so her time and the design and all of that stuff would happen in this one
budget? So you'll just do a budget amendment next meeting? Okay, and then I guess we can't, until we hear about it, we can't put it in the 30,000 in the budget until, is that
Well, I think that would be next fiscal year's budget. So if we apply for it now, we expend the $10,000 to do the preliminary design, and that would be an expense for this year. I apologize, I didn't put a funding source as I normally do. I would recommend the undesignated reserves.
That's what I was.
I'm sorry, I missed that on this one. But then next year's budget, you would have that expenditure of $30,000.
Thank you.
What's the distance from this parking lot to the end?
I did that with Kathy Vincent. I did that last week, just using GIS. And by the way the crow flies, I think it was close to 1,300 feet, 1,200 feet.
Totally unfeasible. Just plain common sense. It's totally unfeasible in the priority of things. There's up and down hills. It's not an easy walk for anybody here to walk out right now. I think it's totally unfeasible to think that as a kayak launch. There are other possibilities, maybe working out a lease with one of the other associations. We haven't even looked at other alternatives. To spend that kind of money and it sets up priorities now, I'm totally opposed.
There's I guess a question that Mike brought up earlier. I guess it's a legitimate question. Do we know, and I understand it's the HOAs primarily on the south side. People ask for a lot of things, as we all know. But do we have any sense of how many people would actually use it? Because I think
you can answer that one. When we built, when the associations put up kayak racks, they didn't know. This is sort of like if you build it, they'll come. There's no way to know, but you know that by the fact that you've added kayak racks periodically, that there's an interest in it. And I can't imagine that there's any difference between the interest that aren't part of your association or fight scope and on the other ones. It's got to be the same.
Well, I certainly think that there's a sense that if you offer something, people will say yes.
They'll use it, but I don't know.
Of those options, Mike mentioned, I was having trouble following them. Well, I just wasn't familiar with where locations he was talking. But yeah, I was just asking Mark and Sheila if they knew when the next PICSCO meeting, timing the PTA meeting is good. I just know based off of discussions I heard on opening up access, opening up parks, the three major parks of the two major eastern associations in the Sound. I don't see that as very likely, but it's worth asking PICSCO if they would consider opening Garner to those. But I think I know the answer. You could ask.
They're getting ready. I heard they're getting ready to put a fence and a gate guard in our park.
They are.
Yeah, and Rob, I won't speak for your association, but I don't want to be within arm's length of asking Dick Belanger if we can give access to several hundred other homeowners to his gates.
You don't have to ask Dick.
Yeah.
But this is 1,300 feet. Go out at the end of this driveway and go 1,300 feet down Final Boulevard and see if you call you a kayak down there.
Clark, I'm an old guy and it's an easy walk. It's not a hard walk.
Excuse me, I was just there 2 weeks ago, Ted, so you must be very well off. I did it myself. And I would not take my 12-foot kayak on wheels or anything else down that length, down those hills, up those hills, and around that bridge. I would not do it. First of all, if we had an access to it, so we could just walk to the beach, it would be nice. We haven't had that. That might be the first step.
Anybody else? Okay. I would entertain a motion to approve applying for the grant. You know, I understand from listening to the UDO discussion that motions have to be positive. But if you're not in favor of applying for the grant, then you vote no on a positive motion.
Correct.
Correct. Okay.
Mayor, I'll make the motion. I make a motion that we authorize the town manager to apply for the grant for the kayak launch ramp.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
At this point, I think it's not the right thing for us to do. So that would be a positive no.
Okay. I mean, the mayor in Bill Connect's absence could vote. But I think we need to look at this a little more. I do. Yeah.
Well, I'll check with TKA, Brett, Robert, tomorrow night.
Next meeting is the 21st.
Yeah. I'll check with Mike School on the 21st and I'll see if there's any other options in town.
Thank you. Mayor, checking out.
I think that's a fair thing for you to do.
Okay. I think that's what I voted. Mayor. Next item is competitive compensation for recruitment and retention of PKS staff.
Now, you need a motion to go in the executive.
No, we're going to have.
Oh, I'm sorry, we'll do that first.
This is in the public.
You got it. Right.
Yes, leading off this issue, I thought I'd just help set the framework here a little bit. We've lost, most folks know, we've lost 3 very good employees in the last month. And it's underlining a labor crisis, and I don't think that's I'm overstating that, but it's underlining a labor crisis that has several root causes. One, of course, is compensation. And I'd like to remind everyone that we did that pay study just 2020, 2 years ago. But just in the past 6 months, a number of our competition towns, competition for employees, by the way, have either done pay studies or simple outright salary increases across the board. Another component here of this crisis is the lack of qualified employees for vacancies that we're currently experiencing. And not just basic qualifications, but the quality of people we want to work here for. And Ryan filled us in last month on the difficulty of police bills. And we're currently experiencing difficulty finding someone that Julie and I believe fits the bill for the tax collector position. So, and then I think another component that we should consider, the board should consider, the lack of qualified employees for current positions that we have if we were to lose them. And the 2 best examples I have for this is Jim Taylor. If we lost Jim Taylor right now, we would be hard pressed to find a
Building inspector.
A replacement for him.
Yeah.
We had Donna Turner here helping him after the storm. Several of you met Donna. She was in several months ago with a kid, a young kid, training her as a building inspector. And she's part of a state program that they're taking experienced retirees people, having folks with minimal either contractor experience or inspection experience, train them up. So that's another statewide issue. And the competition for paramedics in this county is so acute right now. that, my point is, if we lost either the building inspector or the medic, or any of our medics, or any of our public safety employees in particular, it'd be tough. Next, I'm on the next slide. I'd like to point out that the inefficiencies caused by losing employees to other local governments is exacerbated by a couple things. So we've got that small town conundrum that we all know exists, people wearing multiple hats. It's not simply filling the right person for a right job based on paper, but what that person can do in a number of other functions. An example, we've got a town clerk who does all the job, all the things that general statutes requires, and that's significant. But that also manages stormwater projects, works with the Coastal Federation on living shoreline projects, manages solid waste complaints, and handles tree permits. And a tax collector who not only collects taxes in 2 towns, not just one, she's also right now the de facto permit tech. We used to have a full-time employee in there as a permit tech, and she's doing that. Additionally, there's things like accounts payable, handling all the revenues, and their jobs, as Joy pointed out, is handled by multiple people in other larger towns. We also have a component that I'm calling just position uniqueness. Also common to small towns, and it makes finding the right replacement that much more difficult. Example being a public safety administrator who's here right now who does HR as well. And Julie, a finance officer who manages 5 FEMA projects at once, to include the excess funds, which has a number of components itself, and is also has an administrative role as a department head. So there's also a factor here in Pine Knoll Shores where we have department heads with multiple high-profile jobs beyond what maybe everyone is aware of. Fire and EMS, our leader there, or chief there, also does emergency management. And that's not the case across the board, but I go to the meetings for the hurricanes, and often that's either the town manager or the police officer. And of course, public services and water department, just as an example, we have 4.5 FTEs there. Atlantic Beach, which isn't that much larger than this, about 300 more full-time citizens, full-time taxpayers, and the water system very similar to ours, quite frankly. Atlantic Beach has 15 employees between the public safety, public services department, and water. We have 4.5. And then, and this is the big one for me, the critical importance of staff continuity. So we all know this is a good thing. I think we all know that we benefit from it. When I thought about this and looked into it, we have the longest tenured finance officer in the county, the longest tenured police chief in the county, the longest tenured fire chief, and asterisk, the longest tenured water system operator. Asterisk only because we hired Sonny in 2008, but he's been here since 1978. But that
10 years old when you
Gosh, Sonny.
that continuity is also something I think we should think about this, because if we lose them or if we lose their people, it's simply not good. Just a couple comments on the next slide on the pay study itself. Just a reminder that our objectives of the pay study were recruitment and retention. And something that I recall several commissioners saying is that we want PKS not just to have enough employees, we want Pine Knoll to have the best employees. And that might sound like window dressing, but I think we meant it. I want Ryan to talk a little bit, and thanks to Commissioner Robert for actually priming the pump and asking this, because I think it's a good example. Ryan, will you come up here and talk a little bit about the cost of retrain, the cost of losing a cop?
Hey, good evening, everybody. And I'll run through this quick, and anybody that has any questions or want me to expand on anything, please feel free to ask. So the average hiring cost for a police officer, just hiring, which includes a background investigation, a psychological, a drug screen, the necessary training as far as firearms training before we hire them, is around $4,500 per officer. The average equipment cost to hire an officer, and that doesn't include equipment that we already have, like radios and firearms. It's equipment that's unique to them. Uniforms, specifically uniforms and Kevlar vests, which are sized for the officer, is approximately $3,000. Field training, and this is dependent on if we hire somebody that is inexperienced or if we hire somebody that has experience. So the average field training time for somebody that's inexperienced is 3 months, which equates to 45 shifts and 12 hours per shift. It equates to 540 hours of training that they're required to have by us after we hire them. So your average training salary in that time period, based on today's figures, is $9,300. The cost of the field training officer to train them is a little over $11,000. Versus if we hire somebody that has experience, the average field training time is about a month or 15 shifts. And so your average trainee salary for that, and I just used the salary on the last experienced person that we hired, was around $3,200, and the field training officer salary of $3,700 for a total of $7,000. So the total cost, if we hire somebody that's brand new out of basic law enforcement training with no experience, is around $28,000, compared to if we hire somebody that has experience, around $14,000. And I'm going to use the 2 officers that we just lost as far as what training we sent them to over the period of their employment here. The lesser experienced officer who was here for about 1.5 years, we sent him to roughly 242 hours of formal training for a salary cost of almost $5,000. And then the more experienced officer that we just lost, we sent him to around 578 hours of training with a cost of about $15,000. And that doesn't include things like fuel per diem when they go to training, if there's a hotel expense, wear and tear on the vehicles, and things of that nature. So,
if I could, let's just take the more experienced officer. All of the things that we sent that individual to for training were required, or not all were required?
I would say they're the industry best practice based on the experience that he had and the role that he was in. We sent him, none of that training was required, but for the role that he was filling, to not only teach him and educate him how to do it, but also protect the town. That was the training that we.
So it would be your expectation then that to replace that officer, you would propose that whoever replaces that individual either come with, or we would spend those hours to get that person up to that same level?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And what you stated doesn't count. Just the knowledge that people have of the community, of the people in the community, the special circumstances.
Absolutely.
And so forth.
Yeah, and there's an intrinsic value in just knowing Pineville Shores and knowing street locations and knowing, who your, local troublemaker is, that maybe that's just what he is, and maybe he doesn't need to get arrested that night. And maybe we just send him home. But yeah, the value of knowing the town, knowing the people in the town, knowing what the culture of the town is, it's hard to put a value on that when you lose someone that's been here a number of years. And it takes, even if somebody comes here with experience, it does take time to adjust. This is a unique place that, it has different needs than a New Bern or a Raleigh or a Greensboro. It has a much more community-based feel, and that does take time to adjust to that. So when we lose someone that's been here for a number of years, that's painful. And
This all makes the assumption you can even find this officer. We're not getting graduates out of basic law enforcement training, and everybody's chasing the same quality person that we are. So
they are.
this is your problem.
you know, like I said last month, in 2014, the state was graduating 4,500 people in BLET, and last year was around 1,400. And so when we can't find them in BLET, then we go to Atlantic Beach or Moorhead or wherever else that has, you know, a good employee. And you know, police departments are no different than fire departments. We know who the good employees in Atlantic Beach are. And if I have an opportunity to hire them, I'm going to try. But that works the same way with us. They know who, you know, the good employees are in PKS, and they're going to try to hire them. And, you know, most times they can't, but sometimes, as we've seen recently, it works in their favor.
All the big towns, or not necessarily even in Carteret County, are looking for the same quality people.
And if we can pay for their training and they don't have to send them to that, then that's a bonus for them.
You know, we can't be the type of town that grows the quality, either EMS, fire, police, for some other town. We can't lose it. We can't lose people just because of money. I understand we're going to lose people for other reasons, you know, for opportunity, they want to move, whatever. But you cannot lose. I mean, it's just foolish business to lose somebody solely on the basis of money. I mean, we've seen the study that came out recently. You know, our goal has always been to be somewhere above the middle. And we're suddenly right at the bottom almost. Even our neighboring community, which is paying more than we are. It's silly to lose people for money. It's just foolish.
I think you can make an argument a whole bunch of different ways, but one way of thinking about this is the loss in training is equivalent of 2 officers, in this case, 5,000 and 15 is $20,000. We're talking about half an officer you're paying, or you've lost half an officer, if you will, simply by the loss of that individual.
Well, and the way, you know, I'll use my 5-year officer that we just lost. You know, the way that I look at that position is, you know, if I hired somebody, if I had the perfect qualified applicant today that had all of his same attributes, and we hire him today, I still don't consider myself breaking even for 5 years, because that's 5 years of going through hurricanes and learning the ins and the outs of the things that are required to do during hurricanes, or when there's a water main leak at 2 o'clock in the morning, the things that we want our folks to do that other towns may not ask their police officers to do. You know, it takes that long to break even on that position.
Is there a difference? Let's just take on the firefighting and EMS side. Is there a difference between the training that you select for an officer to go through, what would be nice to have, but still, in your view, required because you want that officer to have certain qualifications, as opposed to Chief Baker, where they have to have certain qualifications, either by statute or simply by other requirements of the state for an EMS tech or something like that, that he has to do. He doesn't have a choice in it if we want that level of individual on the payroll.
Well, I think, so there's 2 different things, and our 2 worlds are so categorically different. So the only training that we're mandated to do every year is 24 hours. And I can tell you, if you had a 10-year cop that only went to 24 hours of mandated in-service training with PowerPoints, they wouldn't know how to do anything. And we can't do anything without being certified in it. We can't run radar. We can't do standardized field sobriety. We can't run intox test on drunk drivers. We can't get somebody to blow in an alpha sensor on the side of the road unless we're certified to do it. And so it's all in what you want out of your officers. You want them trained to know how to handle a mental health crisis. None of that training is required, but in a small town like this, you know, I say we all have to be experts, because there's times where there's only one officer working just by the nature of a small town, and that person needs to know how to do just about everything until somebody else with more experience gets there.
You just went through an inspection, or Chief Baker, you just went through an inspection too, right?
Yes, sir.
And
that was ISO 3.
Yeah, right. And you came through with flying colors. You went through one not long ago.
We went through 2 inspections. We went through the League of Municipalities, and one of the key factors that they look at as far as liability management is training, and specifically supervisor training of not just do you send your guy to supervisor training once, but do you have annual recurring training? And are they keeping up with new trends? And are they keeping up with the new things happening? And then we had a inspection by the state on our background files and then some of our training files.
I'm aware that every town knows that you pass these tests, these studies. And that's why they come into it. That's why they're looking at us. You people are the Cadillac of your various specialties. If you had a basic unit that didn't have any of that training, they'd leave you alone. But the people in this town deserve the very best.
Yeah, I don't know that I would want a department where nobody wanted my employees. So there is a measure of pride there, but there's also the awareness that when you send them to training or they interact with each other on calls or mutual aid calls, or they go to court together, they get a reputation and they go back and say, hey, this guy in insert X town is hot stuff. And the next opening we get, we need to try to pull him. And that stuff happens in every department in the county.
I think the very fact that we have a very low crime rate is a tribute to being proactive and have the kind of officers you have out there. And if I have a heart attack, or if somebody in this heart attack has a heart attack or anything, I really want a good, well-trained paramedic. I was a commissioner here when it was a bag and drag volunteer force, and they were well-meaning, they were wonderful people. But guess what? I saw the list of drugs that you published recently that you have to have. It's absolutely amazing how technical it's gotten. I think the people in this town expect the very best.
Yeah, we've set it up that if you have a heart attack, Sonny's coming over.
That's good. I think we're all proud of our public safety people. And I think they have to be compensated, or else they're going to be in some other place. And we're going to start from scratch and start training again. And that's just, it's like baseball. The major leagues are the big cities. Indian Beach just lost their fire chief to Wilmington or Wrightsville Beach. I mean, everybody's headhunting for the same quality people. And we're not making any right now. We know how many people are graduating from the law enforcement training and the rest of it. It just makes no sense not to compensate these people. One way or another, we're going to pay for it. We're going to pay for it in some poor service. We're going to pay for it some lost lives if we don't.
I would just like to summarize it in a direction where I think we have been, where we are now, and trying to maintain where we are now. When the time I first got involved, it's not about me, but that time period in 2008 or so. We went through a period of time where we went through multitasking, encouraging community policing, encouraging the fire department, multitasking together with the police department, with everything up to a paramedic on both sides. In this very room, we've had 2 or 3 people who have either had their own lives saved. I don't mean to overly emotionalize it, but just as a fact. Or recent case, Chief, that you were involved in over with a person who fell in the canal, which I think you were the first person to save that person's life. Unfortunately, 2 days later or so, it didn't work out. But there wasn't time at that point to get the ambulance in. You just happened to be there in the region, I believe. And that's clearly not the same as it is in big departments, but they're really structured. You have your role, you have your role. We can't afford that. We felt we couldn't afford to do that. And yet I think we cannot afford, I guess I'm saying the same thing, but I think we cannot afford to dilly-dally around when we know what the facts are. Because in this community, I don't care whether you come or someone else comes, but just someone comes. And I think the chances are much more when you have 20 people that have potential versus 5 or 8 or so. So it seems to me it's a no-brainer. This is a priority compared to other things.
Well said. Jason, let me ask you a question. Do you have any of your fire EMS people that haven't been approached recently from another department?
No, it's been,
Multiple
it's,
times?
yeah, I got 4 stations in the county and now I can say Cherry Point. You know, approaching my guys trying to, you know, get, approaching several of my crew trying to get them and tempt them to come work for them. It just, it is what it is. I mean, and like Brian said, I think Brian said it good that, you know, when you got rock stars, people want to snipe them. You know, I got probably one of the best paramedics in the county at this point in time working for me. You know, and everybody knows, the old stations know it, you know, and they're all jealous I got him. And they try to steal him, but there's a couple, several others in the county too. So yeah, it was up to 4 and then Cherry Point was 2 days ago in the county, about a week ago. So yeah, so actually about 6. Yeah, trying to snipe my crew, but it's a good crew and I don't blame them for trying to snipe them. I mean, I pretty much how I got that one medic is I sniped him. Yeah, you can't, yeah, and you got rock stars, people try to get them, you know, and you know, another thing is like my station, and try just to hit real quick if I can, small station, and I got just, you know, I got a whole 12 great crew, 3 great captains, but you know, it's like I operated without a deputy chief, and even in the small departments like Indian Beach and stuff, they want to have deputy chiefs and stuff, but I operated without a deputy chief. But that's because, you know, I got just great people that know the intricacies of my station, how I want things done, and, you know, and they do it to the best of their ability. You know, they knock it out the park better than I can. But, you know, and like losing one of that crew, I think the longest tenured one I lost was Matt Backler. And, you know, he knows the trucks, knows the problems, knows the engines, knows the equipment. You know, when you lose that long-standing tenured people, the youngest cat I got is Jerry. He's been with me for a year, but he's proven to be such a rock star. Just one of my slides going to be about Jerry. But you know, the rest of them have been there. I think the next lowest one I got is 3 years. The rest of them are 5, 6. You know, up to Chad, who's been there, I think, 14 years. So, you know, the way I operate the station, it hurts even worse to see one of that crowd go. You know, I know Booker's trying to snipe this right now. He's like, you know, one of my main caps. So yeah, a little bit different. You know, it just hurts to lose that kind of tenured people.
What do you think? Will we go into closed session? Anybody have any other?
If you want to, I'd be willing to vote on it right now.
I'd be willing to, but I just have one comment.
Oh.
My only comment is that this kind of situation, it would have been nice if we had a finance committee meeting ahead of time to really ask some questions and get into the granular stuff ahead of time. I know it's been a crazy week, but it would have been appropriate to call an emergency finance committee session.
What is it we're voting on?
Yeah, we need a motion.
I'm not sure I'm ready to vote on something.
I think, and what you just said, Alicia, is we may be able to cover some of that when we go into a closed session. What do you think?
Yes, I think we have a real emergency. We should go around.
I mean, I agree.
Okay. All right. I entertain a motion to go into closed session, please.
So moved. Second.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. We go into closed session. Does anybody want to take a break or should we just keep going? You guys will have to, you can wait out.
And in summary, it's a very complex grant. The initial grant writer that I had targeted was the same one that we might consider for the kayak launch, Kathy Vinson, in fact, declined to do it. And she's been writing grants for 20 years because she quite frankly told me that we need to find someone with expertise in that. I've reached out to both Whit O'Brien. Whit O'Brien is the agency that works with us on all of our FEMA projects right now. We started work with them last year. And I've reached out to Collier Engineering. I called the interim director of the Eastern Carolina Council, COGS, the Council of Government. COGS normally provide grant writing assistance. They're in flux right now. They're at the ECC and don't have any grant writers on staff. He introduced me to Collier Engineering, and I spoke to their grant department yesterday and sent them a bunch of information. And so I anticipate talking to Julie about Whit O'Brien and myself talking to Collier and considering coming back to you with a recommendation. We work with one of them. I'm working with John Wade right now on a budget and cost estimate for the projects. And what the projects are essentially for this are all the water main replacements that are in our asset management program, as well as the water tank replacement for the Roosevelt Drive water tank, upgrading that, increasing capacity. The deadline for this grant is 2 May, so it's coming up very fast. And I told John and someone earlier this week, this is a grant that is directly addressing something that is on our capital, or will be on our capital plan. So it's really important that we get an application in.
Which one's that?
The first one, the DEQ Water Systems Improvement Grant. So anyway, that's it on that one. Moving on down, this is something I sent to you right before I left for a week, but with an incredible window of 21 February to 31 March, the state put out a grant application, a notice of funding opportunity under disaster relief and mitigating and disaster relief and flood mitigation. I missed a word. Specifically, I need for flood mitigation to stabilize areas and reduce future damage. There's $15 million being handed out, and it's 100% funded. And it's focused on construction of new stormwater infrastructure. There's 2 areas that I will, I'm targeting in my view right now, again, addressing needs that we know we have. One is Arbor Court, and when I talk, and the other one is Cedar Road. Arbor Court, you're familiar with.
Right.
Couple years ago, Paul Ferrone, God rest his soul, and Ed Stallings came to us. That's that area on Arbor Court that gets about 2 foot deep. Literally is cut off in sunny pumps. The other is Cedar Road. There's an area of Cedar Road, Sonny helped me with an address. There's an area of Cedar Road that during the worst of flooding, as in major hurricane events, also becomes impassable. Both of those have the same simple solution. If we can have drop inlet some sort in the right of way and have a pipe directly at the canal shut off with emergency opening only during storm events. In other words, this isn't a
Free flow into the canal.
This isn't a free flow into the canal. And as you remember from our providing, we checked into all that. We all know what the canal looks like in a hurricane anyway, but I'd like to target those. I'm not asking for approval to apply right now. I may have to call a special meeting because of that deadline, likely will. Hopefully I can add this on to the budget meeting. I think we can do that grant in-house. That looks like a simple one. So we'll give it our best shot.
That's in the same area where the engineers back in '83 were going to have the reverse flow.
Yep.
In fact, the landowner there on the left-hand side has said that they still have, they never got back, or the easement was never given back. The town still has an easement. I don't know if that's so.
Not on the tax record, same. It could be buried in registered deeds.
Well, she just bought the house 2 years ago, so it depends what some lawyer found out.
So if we can get this line on Cedar to go to the canal, and then we can extend the line from phase 2 all the way to Holly, that'll go a large way to addressing that whole 5th Street area. So I'll probably again have a grant approval or request approval for a grant application. I don't think these will be tremendously costly. It's literally just a gravity fed pipe. The tough part will be legal expenses for easements and all that business. So Lot C improvement, mentioned this in a note I sent to you, but for the public, it's turning into a sand pit. Sonny is awaiting costs for a concrete pad, and may propose in the April meeting that we fund this with reserves. These guys must be really busy. We're getting a hard time getting cost estimates. Yes.
Just because we're not supposed to build any concrete here. Is there any impervious kind of surface that would work?
Yeah, impervious concrete.
Well, even if not concrete, but even
You mean like,
crushed gravel or anything like
what's,
that?
that's what, right now, we just hauled $2,200 back to Billy's. That's why we need to change on.
I think the impervious surface with the vegetation would clog really quickly, because that stuff has to be like swept.
No, but I'll tell you what might work.
So,
If it would hold the weight of a truck. Not the impervious concrete like the streets of Maritime Woods, but the pervious, what do you call it? Like you have, what do you call it?
Curbstone stuff.
Paver stone?
Yeah, they're like an X and there's dirt in the middle, like where you park.
Looks like lattice.
Yeah, it looks like lattice board, but,
Truck damage it,
Sorry.
But if you look at the geography of that, or the
We did
the area, that particular area, they all kind of all around the forest.
Damage, yeah.
That's about the least place that you need to have a problem with that. There's off that, the south side of that is a deep ravine. The east side of that's, I say deep ravine, 3, 4, 5 feet. And so that water will just dissipate.
Yeah, and they probably
It'd be perfect there.
slope it, yeah.
It's at least,
The truck got stuck last month. We had to get the backhoe to get it out. For real. That was not fun.
no, but I mean, and you don't need to have it go all the way to the back. It's just where the truck will be to put the backhoe down.
What we need, well, can I talk to you later? Because I want you.
Yeah, no, I am.
I have to show you, Andy, it's all be done.
I've been there.
I don't want to do it. We have.
just,
Fine.
Let's go, let's move on.
the Salter Path Road water main replacement, again, south side of the road, Willow Road, Atlantic Beach connection. Survey's complete. John Wade's preparing the preliminary plan now. The next step is Wade doing a walkthrough with Sonny and I to make sure what this preliminary is. It's fairly, get a chance to take a ride with Sonny and have him explain to you what it is, where and what the pipe upgrades are, and in particular, because I found this interesting, where the 3 road boards are and what it means to equalizing water pressure on both sides of the road. So after we do that, after he essentially approves the preliminary plan, after he approves the preliminary plan with Wade, then he's going to proceed with the permitting, which is DOT, which is perfunctory. Public water supply has to approve it. Sonny's boss at the state level, if you will, and he may require an erosion control permit. So
Just on that one, when the surveyors were out there putting in their stakes and flags and everything, people called me and said, so you made a decision to make those sidewalks?
yeah, I got a lot of calls too. People thought we were demarcating sidewalk locations. I got a few calls on that. I have not had any luck getting a response. Recall, I spoke to you 4 or 5 weeks ago that I had a phone conversation with our DOT rep. John, I'm going to call Pat Kelref next week and ask her for help on that. Of note, the Division 2 engineer just left. There's a new Division 2 engineer.
Is there new up?
No, it's the guy we like. No, the guy was
coming.
Well, we like them all, the DOT.
Yes, okay.
But the guy retired, but no, the new DOT Division 2 engineer is Jeff Cabanas, who's a good man. Maybe, we'll see. But anyway, I'm going to approach Pat Kelref next week. John will probably talk to you about that.
Okay.
And then lastly, this is an add-on, I don't think it's on the slide, it is on the slide. Heard just today, we were accepted as a host town for an NC fellow. I think I sent you something about a month ago on that. This is a program put on by the North Carolina School of Government to essentially give us an intern for a year. Recent graduate from university. The cost of Pine Hills Road is a little less than I briefed you last time. The cost to us for the year would be $25,000. I would essentially pick him or her up, and there's a vetting process. We interview, we talk to them. They wanted an answer due back soon. I told them I'd give them an answer the Friday after our budget meeting in 2 weeks from tonight. I know we won't have the general fund budget finalized that night, but
the last two interns we had were wonderful.
well, what I'm thinking that this young person could do is he, along with a couple other staff members, could really take a bite on getting some things moving on those strategic plan implementing actions, as well as a number of other things. And it would also kind of tangentially impact the transition plan and the discussions of FTE. Now, this would be a green kid right out of school, not pretending that we'd be hiring someone who we could, put in charge of the UDO or anything like that. But I'm inclined to recommend to you 2 weeks from tonight that we bring this kid on. But we were selected, if you will.
You probably said this, Brian, I'm sorry if I missed it. They would have a degree in?
I don't know, Robert. It's a good question. I hope it's public policy type thing.
We get to pick them or?
We get to interview. Yeah.
But this is out of the school, which school?
School government, Chapel Hill.
Okay, so
I don't know if all of the fellows are Chapel Hill graduates. Matter of fact, I would bet they're not, quite frankly. I don't know if all of the fellows are Chapel Hill graduates. The program is put on by the school government.
Usually the Masters of Public Administration or something related.
We don't have to worry about housing for them or anything.
No, they arrange all of that and they get a stipend from school government and such. So it'd be an extra hand for a year, but it could be a busy year.
Yeah.
And for that cost, no benefits, no 25 grand.
So they could clean out a little area in the bank.
Yeah.
A lot of rooms downstairs.
but does our 25 grand doesn't go to that individual, or
Correct. It does not go to the school government, and they administer the program.
They might want us to help find us.
That's all I have. Jim.
Okay, any questions for Brian on any of those items? All right, Julie.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
I just have a brief report on tax collections. In the consent agenda was the board consenting to advertise unpaid taxes in the newspaper. That will happen, I believe, in 2 weeks. So any unpaid taxpayers will be listed in the newspaper, which is that's what we do. So looking at we're neck and neck with prior year on tax collection rates. This current year for ad valorem, just under 99%, and the prior year was just over 99%. And then for beach tax, again, we're right there at 98.5 roughly, and 99 on the beach tax side. This is where, it dwindles. We don't get, we're trying to, I think letters go out signed by me here soon in conjunction with that advertisement. And then after that, they get the big man's signature. And then after that, they get Neil's office signature. So we just progressively increase as we're trying to collect. So, but it's not bad. I mean, when you look at that on the total levy of 2,056,000 and we've collected 2,031,000, we've only got 25 to get on the ad valorem side, and then 4,000 on the beach tax side, so it's not bad at all. It's an excellent
Thank you.
tax collection rate.
Any questions for Julie on any of that? No. Okay, Chief Baker?
Yes, bring up current awareness, but and I'm kind of early yet, but I don't think people are flocking to the breakers just yet. But bring it up just because, like Kramer says, a little background before COVID. Myself, Kramer, Mr. Kramer, Brooks, we're trying to do like rip current education awareness, going out to colleges and schools and talking to kids and whatever. COVID, all that went to trash. But the beach community starting last fall, got talking about doing like a community effort, awareness, education. Emerald Isle is leading it up. Hannah Smith out of Emerald Isle is leading it up. And all the beach communities are involved. I got Jerry, Brooks, Tanner working with Anna, Indian Beach, AB. They tried putting together a video at one point with just ourselves and using GoPros and whatever we had. That didn't work too good. So recently, and this was just Monday, I believe, Emerald Isle footing the bill to get a production company, TriWorks, out of Moorhead. And they're going to do the video editing and they're going to do the videos and stuff like that, and do the safety videos. So it's just in its infancy, but it's really cool. It's like one of the first coordinated efforts I've seen in about anything with beach towns, but to get everybody working together is kind of cool. I can't wait to see it all come down.
Any questions?
No.
Okay, Chief.
And I'll split the bill for the TriWorks thing too, so.
Charlie, next slide. So just wanted to give you guys a rundown of our arrests in February. I'm not going to run down each one. If anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Really trying to increase, especially with some of the unseasonably warm weather, our presence on the beach early this year. And we're up significantly on our beach patrols this year compared to last year. And I'm really trying to get out in the neighborhoods more on bikes, which is just a phenomenal opportunity to just stop and talk to people. And it's a good conversation starter. So we're going to try to keep that trend up throughout the rest of the year. And then Brian wanted me to give you guys an update on the Law 6 the additional antenna on the West Water Tower. Last week, Julie and I met with Stephen Ray, that's the Emergency Management Director for the county, along with Tim White in Indian Beach and Billy Pollock, the Police Chief in Indian Beach, to talk about this. We did ask if the county would fund the whole thing on their own, and they politely declined us and said they were interested in doing a cost sharing measure with us and Indian Beach and them. Speaking of, we talked about the potential of them updating the radio system, and if that was in the pipeline to do that relatively shortly, would the funds be wasted? And of course, the Emergency Management Director couldn't give us a definitive answer, but as of this date, the county commissioners have not inclined to allow the county to put out any request for proposals for a new radio system.
Well, not only that, they declined doing it. They actively said no.
So the Emergency Management Director thought this would be a good move to increase our radio coverage on the west end of town, and specifically Indian Beach for their entire city limits. So unless I'm told otherwise, we'll just include that as part of our budget process.
So let me add, so this is for the old system to put this antenna up, because they won't go to the new system.
Correct. Yeah, we've got a significant coverage gap on the west end of town, and then Indian Beach, these radios are almost useless in Indian Beach, and they have to do a lot by cell phone, which is very difficult to do in the middle of an emergency situation.
Just to be clear, when you're out on your bike patrols, they're not riding on the sidewalks, are they?
Oh, no, sir. You won't dare get a picture of me on a bike on the sidewalk, I promise you.
Just yes.
He's got a mountain bike that goes across everybody's lawns and flower gardens.
I think that's what burnout, yeah.
Okay, Sonny, please.
We repaired the fairway courts wall, and now it's held up by sand anchors, turnbuckles, and no more 2x4s. So that's one thing we did right. The other thing, we placed the planter out front here, Travis and
For Lois,
Cutler's and everybody, yeah, and put the seed in perfectly. And then we helped the garden club today get ready so they can mulch everything. And we'll do a little bit more work. So next week during Arbor Day, it'll look good right here.
That's for Lois G, not for Jones.
All the girls work together.
Yeah,
Sorry about that. We also put the bids for Mrs. Lois Jean too, but I wanted not to forget our mayor down there at the Garner Park.
Yeah.
And, sorry about that, Mr. Edwards. And we'll be working with Jason's crew, Brooks, and I think Jerry about putting the new poles up on the beach, the safety flags. So they said they needed them closer to the beach as the other towns have it like that, and it's a lot better, a lot more visible for people. So we're going to do that for them.
Any questions for Sonny?
No.
Okay, thank you, Sonny.
Thank you.
Town planner, Kevin, are you still with us?
I am, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes. I just texted him, he's up.
Can you hear me, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, we can hear you, Kevin. Go ahead, please.
Great, thanks. So start off first with regard to single-family landscape permits. As everyone knows in the community, new single-family construction has been very robust. For the month of February, there were 2 single-family landscape permit applications approved. And at a special meeting last week, the CAC approved 2 more. This brings us to a total so far this fiscal year to date of 20 single-family landscape permit applications. It's important to note that in all of last fiscal year, we only issued 17. So again, construction remains very active in Pine Knoll Shores. We have 4 single-family landscape permit applications currently under review, and literally on a daily basis, Jim and I respond to questions about additional development of Pine Knoll Shores. So don't expect this to slow up anytime soon. With regard to Unified Development Ordinance, I think the first 2 bullet points were addressed earlier, but would note that the Planning Board does plan to start its meeting at 3:00 p.m. now to help them get through the process of reviewing articles that are incorporated each month to them and feedback. And so for the foreseeable future, the Planning Board does plan to start their meetings at 3:00 p.m. One other thing I have from a town planner perspective that I don't have for a slide tonight is pertaining to the North Carolina Resilient Coastal Communities Program. Over the next 3 weeks, a couple things are going to happen. There is a plan for a community action team meeting for March 17th, and then a plan for March 24th to have the public input meeting for the program, and then a follow-up CAT meeting on March 31st with the goal of having some projects before the Board of Commissioners to consider as the applications move forward for that program in April. So happy to answer any questions you might have from a planner's perspective before I move on to putting on the building inspector hat.
Communities, are the coastal communities meetings here in Town Hall?
Yes, sir. They will all be at Town Hall. Right. And we'll start the process of getting that out on our various identification platforms, social media, Sunshine List, et cetera, as we move forward this week and for the next 3 weeks.
Any questions for Kevin?
I noticed there's been an influx of advertising signs around town, movers and all that. Is there been a change of those regulations, or are people just doing it?
No, sir, that's a good question, Commissioner Edwards. In fact, I took a patrol around town this week. You are correct. There are signs in the right of way that are not consistent with our town regulations. And I've tried to incorporate a little bit more sign control in the last several days to make sure those signs are either brought into compliance or impounded, and the owners of those signs informed how they should be placed in compliance with PKS regulations.
It's just great.
Practice.
We had an office full earlier this week,
That's great.
not in really, it's real percent.
Interesting on behavior changes.
Okay, Kevin, go on to the building inspector, please.
Yes, sir. For the month of February, there were 14 building permits issued, total value $2,239,499. Issued 10 mechanical permits, 1 electrical permit, and 3 plumbing permits. The total value of all permits issued was $2,317,897. There were 16 tree removal permits, and Jim performed a total of 136 inspections for the month of February. And based on the pace of development and construction activity, I imagine that number will remain pretty consistent, if not get higher, as we move through the rest of this fiscal year.
Okay, any questions for Kevin on any of the building inspector issues?
Thank you, Kevin.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Now the clerk.
Mr. Mayor, 2 big updates. Acorn Court, we had our pre-construction meeting with Morning Construction earlier in February. Since then, they've sent their submittals over to Bree, the project lead engineer, and she approved all of those. They've marked the construction area on Acorn Court. The precast structures, which are the concrete boxes for the well, those will be complete on Friday. The only thing holding me from sending out a full construction schedule is Morton needs to confirm with the subcontractors for the force main install. Once I get that in, then I'll have a full construction schedule. I'll send that out to the residents. I've been keeping them updated along the way.
Your plans for that, construction plans?
Yes, I did. Second, Arbor Day celebration. Working with Arbor Day Foundation, we were able to obtain $2,100 worth of trees that will be delivered here next week. That will be 110 willow oaks and 100 pin oaks. Along with that, residents who come to this event, they'll get they'll get a bag of planting soil to help with the growth of the tree, as well as instructions for how to plant that tree.
Excellent.
So I've sent out an email, if anyone's online listening, you will need to complete that form. If you wish to get a tree, you could either do that beforehand or we'll have it.
Thank you, Charlie. Any questions for Charlie? No. Maybe you should do a reminder, like an all hands vote.
I'm gonna send them throughout next week.
Okay,
I
excellent.
don't have any concern with us getting rid of all the trees though.
Okay. Next item is our second public comment. Do we have any public comments or any hands raised online?
Something on your way to do.
Not seeing any public comments. We did get a question earlier about the kayaks. If there's any concern with parking access for people who bring their kayaks to town hall.
Yeah, I would, I would say not. It'd be similar to people who park here for meetings and dog parks and such.
Charlie, how many people do we have on the line tonight?
At its peak, we had 12. Right now, we have 3.
Okay, mayor and commissioner reports. Anybody have anything they'd like to report on?
I'm an employee. I do have a question and a comment. And I guess for the board too. Down at the east end of town, at the town line, ironically, just last night in the dark, I was going, hey, phone my lights on, but hey, it's Rampage. and someone came out from that access again in the dark. It's right on the town line. It's too close. One's in our town and one's in Lang Beach.
Is this at the where the flashing?
Where the flashing light is. Could we spring to put up a light so at least there's something over that crosswalk in our town? Since I guess Lang Beach won't do it, right?
Right. I wonder if those condos there, the new condos would spring for it. Because I know what you're.
It's just a light.
You can't see.
Long arm light.
Yeah, it's pretty, Clark's been not on me, but Clark's been discussing this. Approach Atlantic Beach, that they indicated they consider it, but I don't think it's gonna happen. We're talking like $300.
Oh, and that's not big money.
Talk to Trace. Okay, I'll say something.
Yeah. So,
Okay. Do you want to slap the table on that now?
well, I'll see what her conversation with Trace is, but I can get it done, Clark. I can get it done prior. I will make it.
All I need is someone to step out there and.
Right.
No, it is dark.
It is dark.
If they're coming from the ocean.
Yeah, you can't see them with the signs, everything.
I saw one guy came up with a bicycle the other night. He had dark clothes on, no lights on his bicycle or anything.
Alicia, I'll go out there with you, show you what we're talking about, just before you talk to Trace.
I saw him last night.
County Transportation Committee, I don't know what's going on. I tell you, we did not meet in February, we're not meeting in March, we're not meeting in April, the next meeting, the first meeting scheduled is now in May. I don't know what's going on.
Do you have anything, Robert? Okay, I want to thank everybody for coming. I think we had a really productive meeting. I learned a lot. And at this point, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
That's it.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Thank you again.
Before, I'm mad.
I like the pockets.
Mine.
Well,